Welcome to Sales Warrior Inspire. Welcome to another episode of Sales Warrior Inspire. That's where I get to talk to business people out there that are using God in their lives and finding success. And this morning on this episode, I have Yvette Audrain McKinney on the line. Yvette, how's your morning going?
So far, so good. I can't complain.
Excellent. Yeah, it's kind of really early in the morning. About 10 a.m. in Dallas right now, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So again, this is where we talk about, business success, and really how we get led in a certain direction, and why, we want to have like goals written down, but we also want to be like open to opportunities that might present themselves. So, so Yvette, why not just share a little bit about you and kind of your journey, and I'll be quiet.
Oh, okay. So I'm originally from Kansas City, moved to Dallas to go to college. While I was in college, I actually started waiting tables. I had never done that before.
Yeah.
And I was actually terrible at it when I first started, but
Yeah.
eventually I figured it out. And I thought that was just going to be my like temporary, just for stay for summer school kind of job.
Sure.
And I ended up, I stayed on with them kind of for the next 2 years of college, just working a few shifts a week. And
Okay.
I learned a lot of what I kind of base my sales strategy on from one of my first couple bosses there, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and then actually after college, I ended up not pursuing my advertising degree and didn't really
Right.
know what I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
I stayed with that restaurant company for a little while, and then eventually decided that I wanted to go into management there. And the way that was is,
Okay.
the company that I worked for, like all of their restaurants are kind of, they're built the same. They have a
Yeah.
system that works for them. But this particular restaurant was one of the only ones that they didn't build. And it was basically, it used to be this like landmark type institution in Dallas. It was this big diner.
Sure.
And basically somebody from that family married the family from that I worked for. And so
Okay.
then it became a different restaurant. And
Yeah.
what was different about it is that they had a downstairs separate dining area.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of history about it. Like at one point, I think they actually, Jack Ruby, there was a gentleman's club downstairs, not like Tata's, but like, bourbon and whiskey, like think back to
Oh
that time.
yeah, sure.
And Jack Ruby was actually a member of that club, if you can believe that. So
I can
yeah,
believe that.
yeah, exactly. Anyway,
That's
and
pretty cool.
so kind of once I started working some events downstairs,
Yeah.
I went to my boss at the time, who was he was just a really good man. He kind of was very fatherly to me. Like he always knew what kind of grades I made and who I was
Yeah.
dating, and he always he like spent a lot of time kind of like mentoring me, and I've always been very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And so I went to him and I said, okay, I have finally figured out what I'm going to do. And he said, all right, Yvette, tell me what you're going to do. And I said, I want to do Pam's job, because Pam was the person
Okay.
that planned all the events downstairs.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's great, but Pam has Pam's job.
Yeah.
So he said, look, you're going to have to go through a management training program. This company has a notoriously thorough and difficult training program. You literally work every single position in the restaurant. So you're never managing somebody that you haven't done their job, and not like for
Yeah.
a couple hours, like you do it for days and days and days.
Right.
And you did the laundry, did the dishwashing, I was an oyster shucker, I worked in the prep
Okay.
kitchen, I worked on the line, like you do all of that, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, and so I started in the management training program, worked as a floor manager in hospitality. Typically, there's what you call front of house and back of house. And
Right.
front of house is like bartenders and servers and floor managers and maitre d' or things like that.
Sure.
And then back of house is the kitchen managers and the cooks and the prep team and the whatever. And the way
Right.
that seniority goes in the restaurant business is that you kind of go from front of house to back of house in a lot of
Okay.
places. And so
Okay.
I got promoted into the kitchen, and really was just so surprised that I had so much passion for that, because my
Okay.
parents always joked around that, when I got a job in high school, they said, "What do you want to do this summer?" I said, "I don't know, but I don't want to have anything to do with food because that's just gross." And
Yeah.
then, of
Okay.
course, fast forward how many years, and I'm, running a commercial kitchen that produces food for thousands of people a day, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And so stayed with them, hopped around, promotion. And eventually they asked me to take over their off premise catering division
Okay.
for, at the time. It had kind of been almost like an administrative role, like what we call order takers instead of
Sure.
salespeople.
Yeah.
And they were kind of trying something different. So I was the first person they pulled off a very high level management track that
Okay.
had, kitchen experience and sales experience and all of that to run that catering department.
Okay.
As it turned out, it was a successful strategy, and that is eventually who they hired to run their catering departments across the country. That was
Right.
that model that they found. Um, and so I would say that's really kind of where my like more formal sales part really started, was at that point,
Sure.
because there's some people, I talk about this sometimes when I speak on other things, is,
Yeah.
there's things that you're naturally going to be good at.
Right.
And and I don't know if you were there in the meeting when I said this the other day, but
Yeah.
I had a roommate in college, and I remember I wanted her to go out with me, and she was like, "I can't. I've got such and such test tomorrow." And I said,
Right.
"Well,
Right.
that's
Right.
okay. Just study for a little while, then we'll go out late. We'll be home by like 12 or 1." And
Sure.
Yvette, I'm not like you. She said, "I can't study, go out, and then get up and take a test and do fine." She was like,
Yeah.
I have to work harder at that. Like
Yeah.
I'm not able to flip that switch and change that easily." And she's like, "Some people are just different." And I remember that really kind of struck me, and I think about it. And so there's some things that I have an aptitude for, and then there's other things that I'm going to have to work a lot harder at because they just don't come naturally to me.
Right.
Um,
That makes sense.
interacting with people and selling that way comes very naturally to me. I don't have to,
Yeah.
there's some people that like, being around a lot of people sucks energy out of them. I'm the exact
Mhm.
opposite. Sometimes it takes me a stick of dynamite to get out of the house, but then once I'm out, I'm golden, because I am getting a little bit of your energy and a little bit of this person's energy and things like that. So
Sure. Makes
um,
sense.
yeah, so the talking to people on the phone and getting them to be excited about whatever we're excited about, things like that. That part comes naturally. Something that
Hey, I want to
has,
drill down on that a little bit
yeah, mhm,
because I'm a huge believer in that. So when you were building out the catering business, were you just getting on the phone and calling companies for the catering jobs?
100%. So here's the thing. So this company was
Hmm.
Houston based. Their Houston catering office was huge, but
Okay.
none of the offices in Dallas, Austin, or San Antonio had really taken off the same way. And they
Hmm.
really felt like Dallas should be just as big of a market as Houston, right?
Okay.
And so so we had some history in the fact that they had been operating in Dallas, so we had past clients.
Yes.
And then we really kind of started digging into the clients that use them in Houston, because a lot of them were corporate clients and they might have offices in Dallas too.
That's
um,
smart.
yeah, exactly. So we just kind of took a look at, like, okay, what's been successful for them down there? Let's, like, take a little bit of this success, a little bit of that success.
Yeah.
And then part of it too is we had to kind of figure out, so it's different because the family that owns this restaurant company,
Hmm.
like, they're so established in Houston. Everybody
Yeah.
knows them.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
basically, it's like there's certain notable families in Dallas. So
Sure.
they kind of had that prestige, and they had that going for them to be able to use that to sell in Houston.
Yes.
They were known for a good product in Dallas, but they weren't, the owners didn't sit on boards and weren't part of this charity and that. So we didn't have that same
Right.
natural, like, leg in, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, we're kind of, it was twofold. Like, first we had to figure out, okay, who are we going to sell to? And then, fortunately, I'd worked for the company for a long time, so
Mhm.
I was very
Yeah.
well versed in like what we stand for, right? These are our standards of excellence. This is the way we do business. And so that part came easy, but it's interesting because you would think like catering and restaurants are like this. And
Yeah.
they're not just different planets, they're like different solar systems.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
you have I mean, yes, you might have somebody that likes to eat in your restaurant, but the needs for a catering client are so incredibly different than the
Yeah.
needs for a restaurant client. And you wouldn't think so. Plus, you have to be so systemic because you're off premise, So like if I'm
Right.
waiting tables and I go out to somebody's table and I forget something, I can turn around and run back to the kitchen. Well,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if I'm 45 minutes away, I can't just turn around and run back to the kitchen, right?
Right.
Like so
Right. Right. Right.
you have to be very systemic, and that's more from an operations standpoint. But so at the time, and this was, I'm going to date myself here. So
Were
this was
these
probably,
like Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies they were doing business with in Houston, or what kind of companies were they?
yes, yes. And they were dialed in with like the socialites and the whatever. So like if you were going to have a rehearsal dinner at your home, you would, this is who you would call because you knew that they were going to, do everything right. And my kid goes to school with their kids and blah, 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 blah. And we just
Probably
didn't
oil
have.
companies, I'm guessing. Is that right? Being
Oh,
in
yeah,
Houston, a
yeah.
lot of
There's
oil
all kinds
companies.
of, and the big thing is, I think in catering and stuff like that is you want to look for repeat business, right?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and I mean, honestly, I think that's in general. Like, I think people sometimes spend so much time and effort and money trying to acquire a client. Oh, I'm going to sneeze.
Yeah,
Excuse me. um, but then they don't spend that much time and effort managing them and maintaining
yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know? And that's the part that's so crazy to me because it's like you already know they like you. Like they've come back, they've
Right.
enjoyed your service. Like if I'm talking to two people and I'm trying to get something done, this one's a warm lead. Like these people already like me, So
Yeah,
why would I not spend as much time and effort on that and
sure.
find a way then to maximize that?
I'm
And
curious, did
so,
they allow you
ugh,
to use the decision maker's name from Houston to talk to the satellite offices in Dallas when you were building that
yeah,
business out?
yeah, absolutely. And we could get a
Okay.
warm lead, but Dallas and Houston, and for people that are watching this that aren't based in
Yeah.
Houston, like aren't based in Texas, is Dallas and Houston could not be more different. They're different in their outlook, they're different in the makeup of the city, they're different in the feel of the city. So
Right.
some things that work down there are good, but it's not the same, So
Yeah.
you have to know your market, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even if you work for a national company, you're going to sell different in Spokane than you are in New Orleans, right? Because
Sure.
you have different people down there,
Okay.
or up there, or out there, or however. But so kind of one of the first things that I did at
Yeah.
Pappas, and this is not groundbreaking now by any means, but
Right.
in the mid '90s it kind of was, is
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I was always taught that in sales, people will say yes 3 times. And so we were waiting, I was spending all my effort trying to get them to just say yes to catering with us, right? So that's kind of one yes. And then we would like pick their main menu and whatever. And that was the second yes. And then the third yes would be like, well, what about desserts or appetizers or something else, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole lot more that we can do for people, but like they get fatigued when you are just talking with them and like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so we just put together some menu packages. It seems so obvious now, but it wasn't back then. And it was
Yeah.
like appetizer, entree, dessert, service, everything. Bam! Like here's your driving off the what I always say, you're driving off the lot price. And so then I could get them to say yes to that. Well, then I could get them to say yes to bar service, which when I took over, they had very little bar service because they sold margaritas like by the gallon and everything was on
Hey, can I stop you
consumption.
a little bit? I just want
Yeah,
to be able to point out some things that I'm hearing, and I want to drive it home to people that are listening.
sure.
So Yvette basically went and created her target market, and she leveraged relationships that her company already had, and that's key in business. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot of goodness from is the minor yes. You're talking about getting 3 yeses in a conversation. That's referred to as the minor yes. Like you haven't signed a contract yet, but yes,
Right.
yes, yes, yes. You're stacking yeses. I'm hearing that. And then the other goodness that I'm hearing that I absolutely love is you created a choice close. So instead of whether are you going to do business with us, do you want this menu, or this menu? Which would be best for you? That's a lot of sales goodness right there. And I don't want to just run through that too quickly. I want to make sure people take these ideas back to your business, folks. This is how you get something out of this podcast is success is duplicatable, whether you're doing contracting, whether you're doing catering, whether you're selling software, whether you're doing financial services. These things that you're learning today can be used. Yvette, I divert back to you. Go ahead.
No, I think that's good. I think those are really good points also. And, I used to always say, gosh, if I sold pencils, I'd be a millionaire because everybody needs a pencil. So for me, one of the challenges, I'm going to circle back to the three yeses and then I'll go ahead and talk about this. But, so then for bar service, they just made it complicated. They were speaking in their own language, okay, we're going to sell these margaritas by the gallon. And, you get 60 or 30 margaritas in a gallon and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, wait, I have to do math to try and get this figured out. I'm so sorry. There we go. I have a very needy dog that had to get in my lap.
All good. I left I understand.
Anyway,
my dogs knocked my systems over before, so it's all good.
Yeah, exactly. So, so then we put bar packages together, and the way they talked to me is they said, "Oh, Yvette, we don't want to do that because what's going to happen if people just they drink us dry, and we're going to lose a bunch of money." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm a data-driven person, so I was like, let's try it out. I'm telling you it's going to work. You're telling me it's not going to work. Let's get some actual data behind it, right?" And basically what I had done is I priced it as if each person had 3 drinks. Well, when you have a group of 100 people, there are a lot of people that are going to have 1 drink when they first arrive because that's sort of the social thing. And then that's it.
Maybe a half a drink too. Not everybody you can have a full drink. Yeah.
Yep. Several people that won't have anything at all. And then, you're going to have some people that are going to drink a lot, but it tends to even out, And so, we did a bunch of events with it. And I think out of 60 events, there was 1 where they sort of overdrank and it was even close. But on the other ones, we made so much more money off of it. And more importantly,
I bet.
And more importantly, we were actually able to even get that sale in the first place. And so, yes, you want sales because you want to make money, right? But the other thing, but also in what I do, it's experience driven. And so I want to sell that because I want them to have a better experience. That person is going to enjoy their experience more with me if we just roll into their house and we take care of everything from beginning to end, as opposed to, we're taking care of food, but then they have to handle the serving the alcohol. Well, what people don't think is that, okay, if you have 100 people, you're going to need probably at least 300 pounds of ice just to get the beer ice down and everything ready to go. And, and then it's just a better experience. I mean, and that was something that my very first, even when I was waiting tables, that my very first boss taught me is that, look, if we sell them the best things that we have, they're going to have a better experience. If I sell you a better wine, you're probably going to have a better experience. If you have a feature as opposed to fried shrimp, you're probably going to enjoy that more,
Right.
And so it wasn't just me making money on those things was the happy side effect. It wasn't the actual reason behind it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah. You serve a quality product to a quality customer who can afford your service. They're going to want something better.
Exactly. Yeah, and they appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So that was one of the first things we did is we sort of made it more systemic. And so as you can imagine, in the restaurant business, you have what's called a per person average, which basically means, if you take your total sales divided by the number of people you have and your PPA, obviously higher PPA means higher sales typically.
Yeah.
And so as a result, our PPA as a division was insane compared to all the other divisions. And it was just because that one little thing,
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important. And then I think the other thing is, I mean, do you want to touch
What's
or
that?
finish anything? I said, do you want to touch or finish anything else on that, or can I move on to something else?
Well, you know what I was wondering, just because we're kind of talking about like your life decisions, and I always find
Mm-hmm.
this really intriguing, like why a person takes like one direction versus another direction. I know personally like why I did what I did,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm more curious like why you did what you did. Like uh, when you were working at the restaurant and you decided, hey, I'm not gonna pursue my advertising degree, even though I got it.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? Was it like a gut feeling? Do you feel like it was the Holy Spirit? Like why
I
why didn't
think,
you like, go
well,
and grab a
yeah.
resume and start hitting up a bunch of companies? What was it about the restaurant that you worked in that like you're like, I want to discover what I can do here? What was it about like what you were going through and such?
It's interesting. Like, I don't think I
Mhm.
thought that, hey, this is going to be my career. Like in the restaurant business, you always say, oh, where the real job is blah, blah, blah. And then,
Yeah,
they wait tables on the side or at night or in school or whatever. And for me, the reason I didn't pursue advertising was at the time, the market was flooded. It was a cool major to have. And,
yeah.
um,
A lot of
and
people going
also,
after a few
y-
jobs.
yeah. And I
Yeah,
had also said that there was a couple different places that I'd had internships with, and
yeah,
the culture was really something I was not comfortable with. It was a very, like, I'm a competitive person. I mean, if you want to
yeah.
come to family game night at my house, we throw down, right?
Okay, all
Um,
right.
I definitely, like, if I'm going to play, I'm going to play to win, but
Yeah,
I'm not going to cheat. And I'm not going to step on somebody else,
yeah,
and in those particular companies, the environment was just so nasty, and like
yeah,
step on your teammate, like your coworker, your whatever, just
yeah,
to, try and outshine them. And I know myself, I'm a collaborative person, and I'm
yeah.
a pretty positive person. And
Right.
I was like, it'll suck the life out of me. There's no way I can work in that environment.
So it went counter to your personal beliefs. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
congruent with your with like your what your ethical standards. Like you
Yeah.
haven't. Yeah, I get it.
And maybe that's just the Midwestern in me at heart, that I'm a little
Yeah,
bit like nicer. But I'm a big believer that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I'm confident enough in what I do that I can
right,
be friendly with my competitors, because exactly what I do is not exactly what they do. I'm
right,
confident
right.
enough in
Yeah,
my
no, I hear
product.
you.
And that was something like when we were selling catering, is people would call all the time and they would say, oh, well, so and so's, gave me a quote and they can do this for this much.
Yeah,
And I think that's a real dangerous trap to get into. I think if you are trying to be the leader on price, um, first of all, there's always going to be somebody that'll come in. They're going to find a way
cheaper.
to do it cheaper, and you have no loyalty with your client because there's somebody that is driven solely on that price point. And so the second there's somebody else that can beat your price, then you've lost that client. I prefer to build long-term relationships. And so, like, what we used to I tell people is, I'd say, I can't
Yeah,
speak to how XYZ company runs their business. I'm not privy to that. But what I can do is I can tell you who we are, and, the way that we run our business, and who our employees are, and what our standards are, and things like that. And then you can make that decision. And I think the other thing too is it's okay to know that you're not everything to everybody. There's
yeah,
going to be people that you're just not a good fit for, and that's okay. It's kind of
absolutely.
like dating. I used to always say, I'm like, he's not a bad guy, he's just not my guy you
I
know
see. Okay. I
so
really like what you're bringing up right now, because I think on a lot of people that are in business, they miss out on this key element. So did you have like a specific statement of value that you gave to prospective catering clients? Like, did you have like, were this versus that? Did you have like a statement of value that you gave to your catering
honestly,
clients?
I focused a lot on the fact of just the quality of what we do. So I've told you, like,
Hmm.
and we'll talk about this, but this influenced me in my business decisions as a
Yeah.
business owner later on. But the company I worked for was incredibly vertical. They're privately owned, and
So
they
that's a
didn't,
value statement right there. They're privately owned.
and they their standards were so important to them that they didn't want to have to rely on anybody else's standards to meet their standards. So like, I know it's dumb, but they made their own mayonnaise. Okay, this is a huge restaurant company that has, salad dressings and sauces and whatever, not just mayonnaise, and they made all of that from scratch their self every day because they didn't want to rely on anybody else's quality. And so like, to me, that's the attention to detail that they had, and I always tell people that, like, look,
Right, right. So those are
when you call
staff
me,
value statements, what you're saying. Like they use all fresh ingredients. They made it all in-house.
and,
Yeah,
and like, these are just our standards, these are our portion sizes, these are our whatever. And, our staff works for us. We don't use any contract labor. Like, these are people that are
yeah,
trained
yeah,
in our values and our products and whatever. And so, a lot of times that would sway people. Sometimes it wouldn't. I found quite often that in corporate settings, if I could get past the gatekeeper, like the gatekeeper, a lot of times was
yes,
just purely price motivated, you know.
yeah,
Whereas if I could get in front of the decision maker, the manager, the CEO, the whomever, like that's somebody that understood the value of what we were doing. So I was, and I still say this in my business now, I'm not the cheapest
yeah,
option by any means, but I think I'm the best value. I think you're going to get the most for the dollars that you spend.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And nobody wants to be disappointed, particularly in these high emotional event situations.
Exactly. You get one chance, right? Like if somebody has
Yeah,
a bad dinner experience at a restaurant, you give them a gift card and you have them come back. Okay, well, if you have a bad experience at your wedding, like that's it. We don't get a second shot. And
right.
so, and then I think that kind of the next part of it. So we figured out who we are. We figured out how we wanted to sell, and then, we had an idea of who we wanted to sell to or what was working for them in Houston.
Right.
And I was like, I don't think that's going to be the same in Dallas. And so,
Interesting.
yeah. And so for me, I was like, okay, rather than going out into the general public of people that like our restaurants, okay, how many of those people are going to even be having an event or a party at their home or their business? And then of those, how many are going to have budget for whatever we're going to be doing? And I
Yeah.
was like, I just feel like that's a lot of like, churning in the water for maybe a lower payoff. And so I was like, well, where are all these people that have events, And so like one of the things, so like when I first took over, they didn't do very many weddings because they were like, oh God, there's just so much drama, you have to cut the cake and you have to do whatever and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is not insurmountable. So we figured out a system to make weddings easier. Hey, look, we
Okay.
know in the booking process, these are all the questions we need to ask to be able to um, make sure that you have the information that you need to succeed.
Yeah.
And then we took some of our captains and we made them specifically trained to captain weddings, so they were able to anticipate needs and know what was coming and blah 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 blah. Well, then once we had that in place, now I can go forth to every wedding venue in the city that allows outside catering and work on forming those relationships.
Okay. So
Because
that was a target market that you approached.
Mhm.
You went to it sounds like the wedding venues so that you could be an offering at the wedding venues themselves.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of venues have a preferred caterers list. And they do that because they can make sure that you're adequately insured, that you know their policies and procedures, and that you treat their venue with care, because you would be amazed at how many like bad vendors there are out there that just beat up, they don't care for a venue and they break things or they don't leave it clean or they don't do what they're supposed
Right.
to. Well, we did all of that. We had that in the bag, and so it was just going and forming those relationships. And then once people worked with us, they said, "Oh my God, like these guys are great," because we went above and beyond. We, tried to always exceed expectations
Yeah.
and and work not just for the end client, but also to make sure that we were honoring our obligations to the venue, and
Yeah.
steering that client during the booking process to make sure that we're not getting them to commit to something that is counter to what's going to work for them with their venue. You know what I'm saying? So we were basically an advocate for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and it increased our business insanely, and then it just became kind of like, hey, here's what we do. And then, you got to where people were used to working at different venues. And
Right.
then, and that way, so that was a big part of our marketing plan is, once a quarter, once a year, we kind of touch base with our top referral sources and The other thing we
And that
started
brings up a
doing.
good point. Can you drill down on that a little bit? Like I guess your top referral sources were the wedding venues.
Yeah, really event and wedding venues. And then,
Okay.
and then, so we kind of got in with that. And then as we formed those relationships, I asked them like, hey, how do you guys go get business? Right. Because what's working for them might work for me, or I could at least take
Yeah.
something of it. And, or I
How did
also
they
said,
go
hey,
get business? How did the wedding venues go get business?
they a lot of them did bridal shows, or
Okay.
advertising in different publications. Again, this is a while back, so there was actually publications.
Yeah, no, I
um
was sitting there thinking that I was going to mention, did you guys ever
yeah,
advertise in a bridal publication? Then I'm thinking
yeah.
they probably don't even have those anymore.
Well, and here's the thing is that our company as a whole didn't really advertise. Like that was their
Oh,
thing. They
okay.
didn't advertise, they didn't whatever. And so what I found from a lot of the venue
Mhm.
managers was that they were involved in these networking organizations, and they were
Okay.
specific to the event industry. And so
Okay.
I started trying to kind of go to some of those. And again, this was not part of the marketing plan in Houston, but
Right.
I
Right.
was like, I feel like in Dallas, this is the way to go. And I remember, and I've told you, like, I'll stand up and talk in front of anybody. I'm not a particularly timid person.
Right.
And
Right.
I remember when I started going to these, even with me being who I am, I talked to her and I said, God, I just feel so stupid when I'm there. I said, because it's kind of clicky and everybody has their own whatever. And I feel like I have to bust into conversations. And I said, it doesn't feel good. And she said, if you don't feel a little uncomfortable, or even, as you said, dumb, 50% of the time when you're networking, she said, you're not trying hard enough. And she said, because you're not pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And so you're never going to get anything different. And
I like it.
that for, yeah. And that was a huge piece of advice for me, because I'm somebody that, I want to be the teacher's pet. I want to check all the boxes. And
Yeah.
it gave me permission to not feel like I had it all figured out.
Right.
Like it gave me permission to feel uncomfortable and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm supposed to feel uncomfortable now, so I can just proceed. And
That
eventually.
that is a huge gold nugget for anybody that's like listening to this, because in sales and in business, if you're not getting outside of your comfort zone, then you're not in growth mode.
Not at all. And and so I met a lot of different people that way.
Yeah.
I met event planners, and so we started working for event planners, which again, these are people that have repeat business and have gotten to know
Yeah.
us. And so and then after that point, it just sort of becomes a well-oiled machine. It just
Sounds
is
like
like
it. You got
rinse,
the
lather, repeat, and
institutions,
then.
you got the bridal shows, now you got the event planners, you got all these different entities bringing you business. Then imagine it became a management job then, instead of just a marketing job.
Absolutely. And that was and I'll give you another perfect example. So,
Yeah.
staff is really what limits you in catering. You can rent equipment, you can rent vans, the kitchen can always make more food, but there's only so much staff. And so, we offered servers and bartenders and what we called busters at the time, which are the people that, make sure, like, okay, if you have a wedding with 200 people and they have china and flatware, somebody has to go around and they have to pick all that up, and then it all has to be re-racked and put together a certain way so that the rental company can come pick it back up, and you have to
Hmm.
count it to make sure that you're not going to pay for lost
It
items and
gets
things like
full.
that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes if you do it right. Well, what we eventually found is, like, we didn't have, on the really peak days, we didn't have enough, and so I formed a relationship with a specific staffing company. We never
Okay.
staffed any of, like, the big key positions, but in the second Friday in December, if we needed some extra busing staff or whatever, then we worked through them, and they had people that they had trained specifically to work with us and the way that we did things and things like that.
Okay.
And it was great. It was just a little extra. I mean,
Yeah.
am I going to do 50% more business that way? No. But am I going to do 10% more? Probably. And I mean, and that's the other thing I think that's really
Client
important in
experience
sales.
is going to be better too. Like if you have a staff that's trained in your
Yep.
business model, client experience is going to be better.
Well, and I think that, it just, yeah, I think in sales, a lot of times people are looking for the home run, right? Like,
Right.
oh, I want to close this huge whatever. Well, I mean, and that's great. But so if you close that one huge client, then what happens if that one huge client goes away for whatever reason, either because you screwed up or because they had a change in management or they went out of business or, whatever the case may be. Um, you know, if you make small changes over and over and over and over and over in your business, that's, I think, how you see really big changes.
I
Like,
like that.
so, and I flip between operation and sales a lot because I
Yeah,
think they're
yeah,
very intertwined. But like, for example,
yeah.
we had disposable plateware, right? And we use a really high quality disposable plateware. And we're looking at our costs and we're like, man, like the things are just out of line. And yeah, I know costs have gone up a little bit. And so then we had a manager be back at the restaurant when everybody was breaking down and doing whatever. And we
Hmm.
watched when anything they didn't use, they were just thrown in the trash.
Okay.
Okay, well, we always took extra, so it's not that big a deal. But
Right.
if you stop that bleeding just a little bit on every event, it makes a big deal. I had a
That's so.
manager when I was in the restaurant, and I always call it the butter pat lecture. And at the time, you would take out bread and butter. And when you did, we had the little like pre-made butter packets.
Yeah.
Well, as a server, you don't want to run back and forth to the kitchen to get butter all the time, right? So you just grab as many as you can and you throw them in there, and that way you can drop it, and those people are taken care of. Well, if every server in every restaurant every day takes out 30% more butter than they need, that's a huge expense over
And a
time.
waste.
And so if you just manage
Yeah.
it just a little bit more tightly, and like when I was a floor manager, one of the things I tried to do was to teach people how to sell more, like the servers
Yeah.
how to sell more. And,
So what did
one of
that
the
typically sound like, Yvette?
Well, we did. So, like one day, and restaurants usually come in the back, you clock in, then you go to the front.
Mhm.
And so I had put signs up that said, like, okay, what would you do with, and I can't remember how much money it was. This is a long time ago. It's probably like, $15,000 more a year or $2,000 more a month or something. And they
Mhm.
were kind of all over. And so in the pre shift meeting, I said, all right, what would you do with that money? And everybody had
Yeah.
an idea. And then I said, and how do you think you could do that? And they were all like, well, I guess I'd have to work more shifts or get a different job or whatever. And I said, you don't. Here's how I came up with that calculation. If you work 4 shifts a week, and because what we found is that everybody was drinking water at the time, right? There weren't sodas or iced teas. And I said, if you
Right.
just, and it was especially at lunch, because people always complain at lunch that they're like, oh, the PPA is so low, I don't make that much money on lunches. And I'm like, if
I've
you
heard that.
just sold,
Yeah.
if you sold iced tea or a soft drink to even half your tables. So let's say you have, 5 tables lunch over 3 shifts a week. That's this much more sales at a conservative rate. That's this much more tips times this many weeks in a year, and it comes up. And they were like, you could kind of see a light bulb moment for people.
Oh yeah.
And so I think when you make like a little change with something that, again, I'm not just raising your price for the sake of raising your price. Like, you're having a better experience because you're having a soft drink or you're having an iced tea or or a dessert or whatever.
Right.
Then you know then that it's better for everybody. Like when I used to wait tables, you would say, oh, would you like gumbo or salad to start? And the first person would say no, and then the second person would say, you know what, I'll have a cup of gumbo, and the third guy has it, and the fourth guy gets something. I come back around to that first guy and I say, everybody else is having gumbo or salad. Are you sure you don't want anything? And I would say 60% of the time they say yes. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Because
it's
no
it.
is like, and you're bringing up another good thing that I'm super familiar with. The first no is typically defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like somebody throws a ball at you and you put your hands up and you throw it back at them. It's more defensive. It's not necessarily like that individual even thought about it, at that point.
Right,
And and
right.
then, and then the other thing you got going in there that I really like, it's called the bandwagon theory. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everybody's doing it, so maybe you ought to consider it too. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and no pressure. It's just, hey, do you want to be sitting here by
Yeah.
yourself while your friends are eating something? And they would almost
Mhm.
always, a very high percentage of the time, you get a yes.
Yeah. You're
And
just
I think, and you also make decision. You make it. You have to make it easy for people to buy from you. So like,
I like that.
and this goes back to the three yeses. So let's say you order a martini, right?
Yeah.
I could go, okay, well, do you want gin or vodka? Gin. Okay, do you want it up or on the rocks? I want it up. Okay, do you want a twist or whatever? So instead, when somebody says, I'll have a martini, at the time, this was a long time ago, martinis were
Yeah.
still primarily a gin drink.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and so I would say Tanqueray up with olives. And so most of the time, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Well, now I've upsold them to a premium brand. I don't know if they were going to buy that before or not. And I've also eliminated that back and forth and them being fatigued with making decisions about what they want.
I like it. Yeah, you're using suggestive selling, and you're also kind of using emotional words. Yeah, I used to wait tables, so I can wholeheartedly relate to it. And two, like hors d'oeuvres, like starters,
Yep.
and or dessert, and people can split a dessert. Like if they're on a diet, they don't have to eat it just themselves. They could split a
Yeah.
dessert. We'll bring
Yeah.
2 and 3 forks to you. Not a big
Absolutely.
deal.
And I think, and I would say another really big misconception about
Yeah,
sales is you think about the guy, you go to a chamber meeting and he's walking around, he's handing everybody, hey, I'm Tom Jones. Nice to meet you. Love to do your mortgage, and then they just move around and all they're trying to do is check a box and put a card in my hand. Well, I could not be less interested in doing business with that person at that time because I with my clients am relationship based. Therefore, anybody I do business with, it has to be relationship based. Like I
yeah,
need to, I don't want to me, when it's transactional like that, that goes back to just being the cheapest option. Like
right,
there's a consumer out there for that type of salesperson. That is not my consumer, and I am definitely not that type of consumer.
right,
There's a guy,
right.
there's
Yeah,
a guy I know that always says, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And because selling, if you are a really good salesperson, you're probably only talking like 25% of the time. Like, I want to know about you. I want to get a sense. So, after I left that restaurant company, I
yeah,
eventually I segued by doing all of those special events and things like that. I
yeah,
eventually got to a point where I didn't want to do one part of 30 events in a day. I wanted to do all of one event, and I
yeah,
wanted to do some more of the creative things and so I started my own company. And,
yeah.
when I meet with people initially, I love it if I can meet in their home or, something like that, because I can learn so much about them.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
if I walk into your home and it's like, you've got a lot of art and it's like kind of bohemian a little bit. Well, that's going to tell me a little bit about who you are. Or if I walk in and it looks like a museum and it's super tight, or you have two dogs, or there's all kinds of things I can learn just about walking into your home. And that's why when people say, oh, I need
now,
to
how
get
do
some
you use that
information.
information? Because I think that's important for other salespeople. Like, it's one thing to know that like an individual has a set of golf clubs in their house or a picture of them with an animal in Africa, but how do you use it?
Well, for me, in wedding planning especially, it's such
Yeah.
a personal relationship. And like one of the things that I hang my hat on is I plan very personal celebrations. So like
Okay.
I want to learn as much as I can about you. And then based on that, I will make suggestions for ways that we can incorporate that into your event so that it feels very
Okay.
personal and it doesn't feel really cookie cutter, right? So
Oh, okay.
sometimes it's just intangible. Sometimes it also will tell me a little bit about how they make decisions.
Yeah.
Like you compliment somebody on something in their home and they'll say, oh my God, I got that. And if you even knew what it took, I had to go to like all these different places and I couldn't decide and da 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 da. Okay, well, what you're telling me is you're not an incredibly decisive person initially. So I know I need to not give you too many options because I don't want to overwhelm
I
you,
like it.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's something like that. Or they say, oh gosh, we got that when we were in Greece and it was amazing. And like, so that tells me that they are a sentimental person and that they really value experiences. And so I say, oh my gosh, Greece, like, tell me about it. What's your favorite part?
Yeah.
It's a conversation, not an interrogation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I
so,
like that. I
uh,
like that when you said that. It's a conversation, not an interrogation. I like that.
yeah,
That's good.
because, well, and the other thing too is
Mhm.
that I am trying to decide, is this person not, or do they want me? It's like a first date. Like, do I want them? Are they
Right.
a good fit for my business? Because
It makes a
um,
lot of sense to me.
I always say when I produce an event, I have three stakeholders, three sets of stakeholders at every event.
Okay.
Obviously, the people that hired me, I want
Yep.
to make sure that I do a good job for them. But I also have an obligation to all of those people in that room to make sure and advise my client to not do something that is going to make those people have a bad experience.
Sure.
Oh, we only need appetizers for half the people. Nope, nope, that's not going to work. And so, I'm there as an advocate for the guest as well. And then third, me and my company, we're a stakeholder. I need to make sure that this event that I produce is going to be to the standard that we're known for. The reason
Right.
that these people reached out to me in the first place. And
Sure.
so, if I can't please all three of those stakeholders, then that's okay. Again, you're not a bad guy. You're just not my guy.
Okay. I like it. A lot of
Um,
grace there.
yeah, yeah. And then, I can tell you that some of the biggest sales mistakes I've ever made.
What's
Um,
that?
some of the biggest mistakes I've made in
Oh,
sales.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I think that without question, and this goes all the way back to the beginning of my catering days, but if you have somebody that during the process, like they decide they want to break up with you, right? Like they're blah 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 blah, whatever the case is. And I think
Yeah.
I think as salespeople, we're also we're pleasers, we're problem solvers. And
hmm
so our nature is to jump in and figure out how to fix this and how am I going to salvage this relationship and da 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 da
Right.
whatever.
Right.
I can tell you without fail when I've had to contort myself into, a different version of who we are to keep that piece of business, it has come back to bite me in the ass every single time. Because
Okay.
at the end of the day, that person doesn't want what I'm selling. And so
Right.
it's
It
better to
wasn't
just
a fit.
it's better just to call it a day. And so now I had somebody one time that I literally said, you know what? I think you're right. Like it's just probably not a good fit personality wise. I know somebody who would be great for you. And I literally referred them and placed them into another planner's hands that they were more suited for.
I can 100% relate to that. Being a retired financial planner and in interviewing clients, new clients, and I'm like, and they say things like, "Yeah, you're the third guy I'm interviewing. My last two guys I kept for like a year," and I'm like, "I don't want a client like you.
No,
Like,
no. And we
like
used to
literally,
say that
I do not want a client like you.
when somebody has an
Go
event that
interview
they've
another four guys. I'm out."
Yeah. When
Yeah.
somebody has an event that they've planned previously, like it's been going on for years, and I always say, "Well, who did you work with last year?" And they would say, "Oh, I
That's
worked with
the
so and so."
question.
Okay, had you worked with that person for a long time? Oh no, we've had somebody different every year. Okay, that tells me a little something.
Yeah, they
And
have
then,
absolutely no loyalty to vendors.
well, or then also, well, why is it that you know
No,
what what
good. Yeah,
what about your experience made you decide not to work with that vendor again? Because it may be that vendor wasn't good at something, but I need to understand because it's also going to tell me what your hot buttons are, right? It's kind of like if I start like when I was younger, I dated a lot of guys that cheated on me, right? So that's a hot button for me. So even if I met somebody new, like if there was even a whiff of anything like that, like that's a deal breaker for me.
yeah, yeah,
So if somebody has
yeah.
had a bad experience with something to do with somebody, one of your competitors, somebody who does what you do, it's really important to know that because you got to make sure that you like super excel in that particular area and that you don't
Right.
ever let them even feel for a second that they're going to have that same kind of experience because there's emotion involved in it at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we're touching on some really good things. One thing I really want to get into though, because you brought it up early on, talking about how you had the menu selections and you can do this
Hmm.
menu selection, that menu. What I want to drill down is probably even more granular than that, because I think a lot of salespeople out there lose the ability to sell value to their prospects because they put a proposal in front of them and they just immediately go to price and they spend no time in discovery of the value. And the better the menu or the better the proposal is written, the more you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So I want to hear about, like,
Yeah.
did you write the menu selections?
Hmm.
Having a background in copywriting.
I did do all of that, but
Uh,
when you say that, I think one thing, so like I came in and so I'm looking at contracts like that. Okay, we've done this person for this many years, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
why have we given them this free thing every single year, right? Like, why have we done this? And you look back at the notes, and they weren't, the event notes weren't very good, and
right.
so I think something that depending on where you are in your personal development and sales, or as your company, whether you're rolling out a new product or you're starting a new
Yeah,
business or whatever, you're going to have some times where you give away some freebies, right?
sure.
Like that's just part of it, or you're going to do a value add or something to kind of tip the scales to, have to hopefully like start a long-term relationship with this person or this company.
Absolutely.
When you do that, you've got to write your contract at full value, and then you have a line item for whatever you're discounting with exactly the terms of it. Year one discount as a goodwill act to develop a long-term catering relationship. So if Susie admin isn't the person that books next year because they have high turnover there, I need her to be able to pull the contract out and say, oh, I see that they only did this for 1 year, so this year we're going to have to, pay for that, or whatever. Or when her boss says,
Right,
well, why
right.
they gave us this free last year, why aren't they giving us free this year? Oh, well, it says right here. And I think the other thing of that too is if you do something nice for somebody and they have no idea of the value of it, then they can't really appreciate it appropriately.
I love
You
that.
know,
Like you punch up the value, but you let them know like what did you give me? Like
well, because
something free is only
my
valuable if you have a dollar amount associated with it.
my services are
Hmm.
worth this much, period.
Yeah, yeah,
If I decide to do something for you, I don't want to devalue my service. And I think when you
right.
just sell things at a different price point, you just automatically devalue that service, you know? But, and then the other thing too is you have to just think about, okay, a lot of people don't have a plan for what their donations are going to be, right? Like,
Right.
okay, what kind of like do you just is it the person that calls on the phone? Is it, and so like for
Hmm.
us, like we have specific causes that we're
Hmm.
interested in. But then
Okay.
also, but for somebody to say, hey, oh, you're going to get exposure. You say that all the time. Oh, you're going to get exposure. Well, exposure doesn't feed my family,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I need to, there's got to be some sort of give and take. And so a perfect example is I was president of this event organization, and as one of our charitable acts each
Hmm.
year, we planned an event for this resource center, right? And we
Okay.
did everything, and we leaned on our members, and our members donated services and things like that, so they got a way bigger value than they would have gotten because they got free services and things like that. Well, after a few years, you're going back to these vendors and they're like, yeah, I've done this for 2 years. I haven't gotten a single piece of business out of it. Like, I love
Hmm.
y'all, but this is it's a marketing arm of my company.
Right.
I've got to be getting something back for it, right? Unless it's just purely driven by cause, and that's something that is part of your corporate giving structure.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and so what we did is, we went back to the resource center. We're like, look, here's what we're hearing. Like, why can't your members use us when they have private events and things like that? And they were like, oh, we wouldn't know how to facilitate that.
Right.
But what we did do then is anytime that the resource center had something that they were paying for, they committed to
Yes.
using one of our vendors, so
Okay.
that way our vendors could get a little ROI on it. Because, I think negotiation gets a bad rap. Like people feel like, oh, if I'm a good negotiator, I'm going to crush you. Well, you're not a good negotiator, because you know what? If I absolutely crush you, you're not feeling good about this relationship, and
And
it's
you're
not
not a
going
good business partner if you
to,
crush
no.
your
It,
business partners. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think you have to find something that's a win for both people. So like
Makes sense. Yeah.
we needed a new air conditioning in our house, right? It went
Yeah.
out in August. And so, the guy came out and he's like, well, I can do this little patchy thing. It'll be about $500 and that'll get you through for a while, but really you need a new system. And we were like, okay, well, let's just get a new system. And he said, well, I can't get you on the books for 2 weeks. I was like, well, yeah, it's August in Texas. 2 weeks is not going to cut it. And so he said, okay, well, we'll just do that other repair. And I'm like, well, I don't want to pay for that repair and then pay for a new system.
Of
And
course not.
so, and so I said, well, how
Yeah.
about this? How about you just do that repair for free now? And then we'll even sign like a letter of intent or whatever. And then
Yeah.
that way, when your business slows down, you're going to have a guaranteed sale of a whole new system on your books, whether it's in November or January or whenever,
So what do you
And
say?
he's like, at first he's like, oh, I can't really do that. I can't give anything away for free. And I said, okay, great. Then how about you discount my system
$500.
by $500? I said, so
Yeah,
that
which
way,
is the same thing. Yeah.
I'll pay you for that now. And then that way, when I follow through. And he was so funny. He goes, you're kind of tricky. And I was like, but yeah, it makes sense. And so that's eventually what we did, but I wasn't
Okay.
like but I don't think you can't ask for something that's completely unreasonable. Like we both should feel like we gave a little bit. Like we're like, okay, I didn't really want to pay that $500 now, but you know what? He's going to take it off later. And he's like, I didn't really want to give her a discount, but now I've got this on the books for later on when I need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can discount that, no problem. I mean, I get it.
Well, I think you just have to figure out like what do people need,
Yeah.
I think the problem, especially in what I do with events, is there's so many intangibles and people they can't always they don't even know what they need, or they don't even know why something matters to them. So
Right.
you kind of
Right.
have to
That
do
makes sense.
a little detective work to get down to the bottom of it, to say, okay, so this is what's so important,
Yeah.
um, that's why when I wrote custom proposals, I never put every single one of our very best items on the first draft. Like I put some like absolute home runs and then some good things and whatever, because then if they come back, I don't have anything else to reach in my pocket for that's going to knock their socks off. So if I
Right.
hold a little bit of that back, and then I say, okay, you know what? Why don't we change this out and change it for this? And they say, oh my God, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah. I like it. That's it. And not only that, working with them to the end and getting them to
Hmm.
have input in it. Like when you put a proposal together, you own it. But when they make a change and make a decision, now they own it. And a lot of people are just so hardcore about, this is my proposal. It's a yes or a no. And that is the wrong way to do it.
No, and you have to also, like, people. I always tell my clients with things. I say, okay, look, we're going to start with the sun and the moon and the stars, and if that's great, then we'll sign off on it. But if it needs to be the sun and the moon, or if it needs to be just the sun, that's still going to be okay. But let's start with what we like, our dream list, and then we
Yeah.
can whittle down from there. And a lot of times people are they're so predisposed to feel like they have to say no to something. And so I think if you give people an opportunity to say no to like one little thing, then they can feel like they've done their due diligence, and they're not
Yeah.
just being, they're not being careless with money or things like that.
And you're back to a choice close again. So we're not saying whether we're going to do it or not. Are we going to do it with this many items, or are we going to do it with this many items? But we're still like getting a yes. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, that's how you make the cash register ring. Yvette, this has been fantastic. Go ahead and tell my audience like how they can reach you, so that if they want to like hire you, tell them exactly how to get a hold of you. This is the
Sure
time.
thing.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the best is email. So my email address is Yvette, Yvette, at thesimplypartners.com. And that will get you to me to utilize one of two parts of my business. So the first is obviously planning events.
Okay.
And then in several years ago, we were having a hard time getting what we needed for our events from a branding and swag and invitation standpoint.
Yes.
We could either find somebody really creative, but they weren't deadline or service oriented, or we could find somebody very service oriented but not so creative. And my clients wanted all 360 degrees. And so finally, I just said, you know what, screw it, we're going to take it in house. And that way, if I need to bump somebody up on a production schedule, I can do it. I know that this person's event isn't for a long time, so they can, wait a
Right.
few more days or whatever.
Okay.
And eventually that just took on a life of its own. So we also, in addition to planning events, even if you're not an event client of ours, we have a full service print and design shop. So everything from bespoke invitations to huge signs and banners to floor graphics to business
Okay.
cards,
Okay.
flyers, things like that. So
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'll go ahead and promote what I do.
I am John the Sales Warrior Sansoni. I've been professionally selling successfully for 34 years.
Teach God-centered sales principles that help you connect with your client.
What can I teach you? How to prospect, present, follow-up, and most importantly, how to close. I have a 3-day masterclass that includes motivation and the mental tools to succeed in business and sales. My course includes worksheets, audio, video, and can be taken in 30 action blocks. Also included, how to have greater confidence. My course should be $400. If you get it today, only $299. And included my book for free. Once purchased, you'll get free monthly inspiration from me. Just go to
Sales Warrior Inspired
and order yours today. That's it. Back to the show.
Yeah, love it. That's great.
So Yvette, this has been a wonderful episode of Sales Warrior Inspire. So I would just ask you this question. So when you think about like how God has inspired your life in different ways that you've been moved in your life by God, how would you describe that to folks that are listening to this episode?
I would say that life is not a straight line. You know, years ago, I decided I wanted to do special events at this company, and they said, well, we don't really have a job for that now, but you need to get trained in these other areas first. And then that took me on a whole journey. And during that journey, I learned about managing people. I learned about actually like how the product that I wanted to sell was produced, like, I mean, almost down to the molecular level, right?
Right.
And so, and it made it so much so that I needed to do all of those things for me to eventually be the person that I am now, to hope the company that I have. And I firmly believe that was God's hand. You know, like everybody, I was
That's
actually
awesome.
just talking with a friend. I was talking with a friend about this the other day. Like, some of the biggest blessings in my life has been when I didn't get something that I wanted. And then once I'm able to take a step back, I say, oh, you know what? That's because I wasn't ready for that. I mean, honestly, I say that
Right.
I didn't meet my husband till later in life. And I always say,
Yeah.
gosh, I wish I'd met you in my 30s, but you know what? I wasn't ready for him in my 30s. I was a total
Right.
bulldog, and he's a nice guy. I would have chewed him up and spit him out and just moved right on, you know. I had to have that other experience. And so I would just say, you know, trust in God's plan. There's been times throughout my life where I was like, maybe I should just close up shop and go to work for somebody else, because, you know, it's stressful to own your own company.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, I reached out to a couple of people that I really value their opinion. One of them is a big mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And I told him, and you know, he tried to hire me several times, and I thought, oh, he's going to say, sure, why don't you come work for me, whatever. And I told him what was going on, and he said, Yvette, do you really want to know what I think? And I said, yeah. And he said, I don't think you should go work for somebody else. He said, I don't think that's who you are anymore. He goes, I don't think you'll be happy in that. He said, I know you, and I know that you have to be able to work in something that you have passion in. He goes, and I just don't think you could. He goes, I don't see you being somebody that can go just do your job and go home. He's like, I mean, I'll connect you with some people if you want. He said, but I mean, he's known me for 30 years. And he said, I think here's what I would do is I would do this and this with your business. And, you know, same thing like that. I think that's God's hand, that, you know, people that I have met in my life that have taken time to invest in me and believe in me. And I try really hard to put that back out there. And I try hard to just be somebody that connects people, whether there's a perceived value in it for me or not, because I think it's the right thing to do. And I think if you put it out there, it finds its way back to you.
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome. I like it. So we'll go ahead and wrap this episode. So for everybody, it's been wonderful having you on, Yvette, from Sales Warrior Aspire here in Dallas. Cheers, everybody. You want to say goodbye, Yvette?
I do. Thank you so much for listening. I feel like I could talk about this stuff for days. So I appreciate the opportunity.